Hello and good afternoon from Jakarta. Welcome to today's FECI Group's virtual public forum on Indonesia and OECD membership, weighing the political economic implication. I'm Dito, and I'll be the master of ceremony for today's event. This public forum is brought to you by Foreign Policy Community of Indonesia and National Graduate Institute for Policy Studies, or GRIPS, Japan, and is the fourth forum of this year FECI GRIPS virtual public forum series. Today, I'm pleased to welcome over 380 participants from across 26 countries tuning in to our channels. To name a few, we have from Indonesia, Japan, the United Kingdom, the United States, Australia, South Africa, and Mexico. In July 2023, Indonesia officially announced its interest to join the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, or OECD. Approaching to the end of 2023, a letter of intention from Indonesia has submitted to the OECD Secretary General and is currently waiting for formal proceedings of the steps forwards by OECD. Indonesia has been a key partner of OECD and have worked closely together since 2007, along with Brazil, China, and South Africa. Should Indonesia join the OECD, it will be the third Asian country member after Japan and South Korea. Today's discussion will dive deep into the main questions emerged from Indonesia's decision to pursue OECD membership are not merely what would be the benefits, but also what would be the political and economic costs that Indonesia has to anticipate. And what does OECD membership mean for Indonesia foreign policy and posture towards certain countries and any other multilateral economic groups. To begin, let us invite Ambassador Yoshifumi Okamura, Vice President of Ritsumeikan Asia Pacific University and former Ambassador and Permanent Representative of Japan to the OECD, to deliver his opening remarks. Ambassador, the floor is yours. Ambassador, you haven't unmute yourself. I'm sorry, Ambassador, you still muted yourself.
Yeah,
Yes.
I had some trouble with that. Okay. Sorry, I had some technical problem. What is that? Okay. So sorry. So it is a great pleasure for me to be invited here to present myself and talk about the OECD. I've been an OECD ambassador up until December 2022. So I learned that after my departure of the OECD, Indonesia had submitted its accession request to the OECD. I feel very happy. And also, President Jokowi visited Japan last December, and Prime Minister Kishida had expressed a strong support of the Indonesia's accession to the OECD. Maybe today I would like to start with just talking about OECD for a better understanding to the audience. In fact, the OECD was founded in 1961, and 3 years later, Japan became the first non-European country to join. In fact, the OECD is based on the European and American countries for the reconstruction efforts of the European countries, and it is transformed from OEEC, and so the Japan is the first country member to non-European country, and followed by Australia in 1971. And the organization has expanded outside Europe and the and now includes 38 countries worldwide. Okay, what is the OECD doing? Most important thing is the policy coordination. And each member country coordinates its own economic and social policies among its peers. And comparisons and exchange of views on various domestic political policies quite helpful. OECD itself is a big think tank. They say that the world's biggest think tank, but I see that most qualified think tank with a very strong evidence-based analysis. And it comprises about 2,000 or 3,000 experts in different areas. Another thing which is very important for the OECD is the rule making. When the OECD agreed on a set of commitments among the members, it became a guideline for the management of the world economy. So such rules are very important for all the OECD members. When asked which areas the OECD covers, the answer is everything. In fact, OECD's organizational chart, you just have a chance to look at it. It shows just how broad the scope of its activity is: trade, finance, taxation, economic planning, development assistance, environmental protection, industry, digital, science and technology, education, transportation, tourism, labor and employment, healthcare, public administration, gender inequality, everything in a nutshell. There are more than 30 committees dealing with such as these issues, and they have been coordinating policies and making rules in these areas. The rules that have been developed are called legal instruments. And nowadays, these legal instruments counts 268. We do not just make rules, but observe them. Membership in the OECD is a proof of a country's adherence to those rules in such a wide range of areas. So Indonesia's accession to the OECD will show both domestically and internationally that Indonesia is one of these countries. I think that the OECD membership is very important for Indonesia. The membership shows that Indonesia is a quite matured member of the OECD. If Indonesia is to develop its economy and target the global market, this is very, very important because you see the meeting the OECD's economic and social standards enhance Indonesia's credibility, and it will make it easier for Indonesian companies, for example, to enter foreign markets, get on financial facilities or ranking, raise funds, and so on. I come back to the OECD's history. So it was created in 1961. So over 60 years of history, it's divided into two parts. Maybe the first 30 years of its existence was the Cold War. In this period, the role of the OECD was to defend and nurture the liberal market economy model, you see, against the communist or state-controlled economy. And then comes the end of the Cold War. And following the 30 years, 3 decades, the world economy has become more integrated. And the values exposed by the OECD have spread to Eastern Europe and other countries in the former Eastern Bloc. So with the development of transportation and distribution means and information and communication technologies, you see, with the International Division of Labor, in fact, it creates globalization. And after that, OECD become a really center of support of this international globalization. And the organization became a sort of mother of rules that are widely accepted around the world. So rule making is not just among the OECD countries, but rule making is covers this whole process of globalization. OECD countries have had a significant presence in the global economy in year 2000. Okay, but now the situation is going to change. The aggregate gross domestic products, GDP, of OECD member countries accounted about 80% of the world total in 2000. Those developed countries united to form economic and trade rules in the OECD and disseminate them to the rest of the world. Relatively happy days. The OECD has long played a major role in the economic management of the free and market-oriented world. So, and OECD has served as a sort of as a secretariat to the G7 forum. And OECD has been a key player in the global economy for many years. And then, after year 2000, this OECD status is no longer taken as granted. Globalization progressed and the world economy began to develop as a whole. And countries such as China, India, Brazil, as well as the southeastern region achieved industrial development and became integrated into the operation of the world economy. And this linked to developed countries by global value change, interrelated to each other. So the share of GDP of OECD members fallen from 80% to 6% as of 2020. In terms of population, OECD countries represent only 20% of the world population. So the question of relevance, the relative position of OECD members has declined due to the emerging expansion of emerging countries. And in response to this trend, the new forum, G20, was formed. And Indonesia is a member of the G20. And OECD had designated 5 key partner countries: Brazil, China, India, Indonesia, and South Africa. Okay, the OECD offered itself as a secretariat to the G20. Okay, I talk about this mother of rules that are widely accepted around the world. This is the objective of OECD, but there's a contradictory elements as for the globally accepted rules. One is accepted rules, which requires common mindset and willingness to work together. Another element is a globally accepted. That means that as many countries as possible should participate in and apply the OECD rules. These two requirements doesn't go well sometimes. G20 had some countries with a different way of thinking. In fact, G20 has not been able to make rules very smoothly in its history. The basis for rules requires common value or shared values. Therefore, it is very much meaningful for the OECD to get an accession countries inside among the G20 that share values with OECD members. So, as a conclusion, I think that Indonesia's accession to the OECD represents a major leap forward for the OECD. Okay, now among the G20 member countries, Brazil membership is currently under discussion, followed by Indonesia. Indonesia is next. If these two countries join, then OECD's quantitative dominance in the world will become a much larger. I mean the relevance, dominance, not relevance. But that is not all. Japan has been saying that it is very important to get as many Asian countries to keep the OECD's global relevance. Only Japan and Korea are the members from Asian region to the OECD. We want an OECD that fairly reflects Asia's position and views, not only just Europeans and Americans. To this end, we would welcome Southeast Asian countries, especially Indonesia, to join us. So I stop here my presentation, and I would like to answer to the questions from you. Thank you.
Thank you for your speech, Ambassador. Ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, allow me to invite our moderator, Ms. Lucia Novitasari, FECI Woman in Foreign Policy Fellow. Ms. Lucia, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Dito, for the introduction. Good afternoon, Pak Dino, Ambassador Imura, esteemed committee members of GRIPS, distinguished panelists, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to FECI GRIPS Virtual Public Forum on Indonesia and OECD membership, weighing the political economic implications. My name is Lucia, FECI's Woman in Foreign Policy Fellow, and I will be moderating today's discussion. As mentioned by the ambassador before, today's topic is of timely nature and to a great extent critical. Besides the pros and contras on Indonesia's plan to join OECD, equally important is how the decision to join OECD will be translated into policies. Joining OECD requires some sort of adjustment and on Indonesia's side. However, the public has not really got any information about the possible structural changes, especially to our economic and market regulation. So to enlighten us on this topic, joining with us three very capable speakers. The first one, I would like to welcome Bapak Dr. Muhammad Hadianto or Pak Ian, Deputy Director and Lead Coordinator for Multilateral Cooperation on Economy, Finance, and International Financial Institutions from the Coordinating Ministry for Economic Affairs of the Republic of Indonesia. Please welcome Pak Ian. And the second one, I would like to welcome Ambassador Yoshifumi Okamura, Vice President of Ritsumeikan Asia Pacific University and former Ambassador and Permanent Representative of Japan to the OECD. Please welcome Ambassador Okamura. And the last speaker, let us welcome one of the Indonesia's most inspiring and influential female leaders, Ibu Sinta Kamdani, Chairman of Asosiasi Pengusaha Indonesia or APindo. Please welcome Ibu Sinta and let us give another round of applause to our speakers today. Okay, before we start the discussion, let me outline some housekeeping and discussion rules. We respectfully ask participants to keep their microphones muted while the panelists are speaking. We will later have a Q&A session after moderated discussion. You may use the chat box or Q&A boxes in the YouTube. And lastly, please, in your Zoom window, use the format of name and affiliation. Thank you. And let us now begin the moderated discussion. The main question emerged from Indonesia's decision to pursue OECD membership are not merely what the benefits would be, but also importantly, what would be the political and economic costs that Indonesia must anticipate. So the first question will go to Pak Ian. What are the political and economic benefits and risks with the Indonesia membership in OECD would pose to Indonesia? And why do we strategically pursue OECD membership than any other multilateral organizations, for example, such as BRICS? Pak Ian, you may have 5 minutes to answer this question.
Thank you very much, Lucia. Allow me to begin by extending my warmest regards and appreciation to the foreign policy community of Indonesia, headed by my senior ambassador, Dr. Dino Patijalal. And I would also like to welcome His Excellency Ambassador Okamura and Ibu Shinta as a panel of the discussion today. Speaking about the OECD membership, I think the MC has mentioned that Indonesian government filed a letter of intention of becoming an OECD member in July, to be exact, on the 14th of July. And less than 2 weeks, the letter was responded swiftly by the OECD Secretary General, dated on the 26th of July, stating that the OECD in principle welcomed the intention of Indonesia to become one of its permanent members. So when asked about the political and economic benefits of joining the OECD, I think we have to strategically look at Indonesia's pursuance this way. First, I think Indonesia is the only country that is a member of ASEAN, APEC, and G20. All of them are premier global economic forum. And plus, right, if we become a member of the OECD, I think Indonesia will be the only country in the G20 that is a member of 4 prominent multilateral or global economic forums at the same time. And then secondly, the benefits would also help Indonesia in achieving the Indonesia Emas or Golden Indonesia 2045 targets. Right? We would like to have our income per capita increased by a minimum of $30,300 US dollar, with 80% of our middle class. So the OECD will support that preparation through a roadmap to escape from the middle income trap and become a high-income country for Indonesia. Membership will also assist Indonesia's micro, small, and medium enterprises to level up, to become a part of the global supply chain, which not only playing at the local field, also regional and international playing field. In addition to that, I think improving the quality of human resources through implementation of policies and standards in the fields of education, public services, and health would be one of the benefits for Indonesia's membership at the OECD. Now, you mentioned about why we are choosing A and not choosing B. Why we are choosing OECD and not other multilateral economic engagement, apart from, of course, the G20 and APEC and ASEAN. I think first and foremost is that I will come back to what Ambassador Okamura mentioned earlier, that the OECD is a platform that offers policy discussion and standard setting based on the globally agreed standards. So we would like to bring our policy reforms at the national level to a higher level that would meet the interests of the global investors, right? And the OECD standards would help us achieving this. The OECD has more than 270 standards, as mentioned. By far, we are only considered in line with around 15 regulation of the OECD, and that includes in the area of taxation, digital economy, small medium enterprises, and food food security, food and agriculture. So we have a lot of homeworks, if we want to be considered as fully in line with the OECD standards, right? We will have to have around 6% to 7% economic growth in the next 20 years to improve our GDP per capita in order to reach the target of above 30,000 by 2045. But we want to do it gradually. So we are targeting to have around 5,000 US dollars GDP per capita by 2025 and 10,000 US dollars by 2035 and eventually above 30,000 by 2045. So these are stages. There are stages that we need to follow. And I'm not saying that the OECD is the only the only recipe or the only ingredients to achieve that. Becoming an OECD member would help us in achieving that through regulatory reform that is globally and internationally agreed standards. Over to you, Lucia.
Thank you, Pak Ian. Okay, so as Pak Ian mentioned before, Indonesia is the only ASEAN member states that become the member of G20. We also the member of APEC. Amidst the geopolitical and geo-economic fragmentation, we see the trend of middle powers having greater influence, especially for Indonesia. Even OECD has been acknowledging Indonesia as its key partner. It is believed that Indonesia's membership in the OECD will be an opportunity to expand cooperation, particularly in trade and industrial sector. So I have a question for Ibu Sinta. From your perspective as a businesswoman, as a womanpreneur, may we know your opinion on how OECD membership would impact Indonesia's economic diplomacy and trade with other countries, particularly on primary commodities such as nickel or maybe palm oil? And will OECD membership bring more opportunities to our businessmen and entrepreneurs compared to other multilateral cooperation? Please, Ibu, you may. Sorry, Ibu, you still mute.
Sorry. Thank you, Lucia, and thank you, FBCI, for organizing this and inviting us to share our perspective. Clearly, if we see that the OECD, with its wealth, experience, and also expertise, offer a clear platform to learn, share, and implement policies that have proven successful in other member countries. And Indonesia right now is sitting in the crossroad of moving from developing and developed countries. So it has definitely a lot of opportunities, but I think we also need to see some of the challenges if we do want to ascend into OECD. And I think when we talk about the middle income trap specifically is a phenomenon that we also have to vigilant about. And joining the OECD can be instrumental in steering clear of its pitfalls. It provides also a roadmap for sustainable economic growth, innovation, and development of human capital. I think this is all component essentials for going to the next level. So I do believe that I think the economic diplomacy is a big part of it, and I think we in Apindo recognize that the business community is definitely an integral part of this journey. And the principle advocated by the OECD, including those related to the economic, social, and governance matters, really align with our vision for responsible, sustainable, and ethical business practices. Now, I think we need to really pay attention, focus not only on preparing to meet the prerequisite of becoming a member, but should also go deeper in understanding, executing, and maximizing all the potential that arise from Indonesian membership in it. I think we believe that economic diplomacy is the linchpin of our nation global engagement strategy, and it is therefore deliberate diplomatic efforts that we can enhance our economic ties, foster collaboration, and attract more, obviously, foreign investment, crucial for our growth aspiration. I think the decision to consider joining the OECD is a pivotal one, and I think it represents also a commitment on aligning our economic policy with international best practices, fostering more transparency, accountability, and good governance. I think these elements are very critical for propelling our nation into the league of developed countries. So when we talk about specifically the primary commodities, you were questioning about that. I think it should be noted first and foremost that Indonesia membership in OECD or any other international institution cannot be considered as a silver bullet to create global acceptance to Indonesia existing economic policy in primary commodities. So, especially if Indonesia insists on utilizing trade restrictive measures, such as what we're now going through on the permanent export ban to develop its downstreaming industry, instead of proper creating a market-based business climate in the relevant industry subsector. So we really understand why the government wants to do this on developing more the downstream industry, but I think the fundamental problem of Indonesia economic diplomacy in the primary commodity is the lack of coherence between the domestic policy and the universally accepted principle and rules in global trade, which make it way too easy for other countries to contest and undermine Indonesia foreign policy position or diplomacy when defending our domestic policy in primary commodity. And this lesson learned, for example, on the Indonesia-EU dispute on nickel export ban in WTO, which resulted, of course, Indonesia has lost in the first dispute settlement panel in 2022. Just to ensure the success of this economic diplomacy, Indonesia domestic policy must first display adherence to the fundamental principle of Indonesia international trade regime. And this is to ensure the free flow of goods and services as committed in WTO. Such adherence should be displayed by Indonesia, including when settling disputes in the primary commodity, like the ongoing nickel dispute that's happening. The question is then whether or not OECD membership can assist Indonesia to display such adherence. And the simple answer is yes, to some extent. OECD membership accession will require and assist Indonesia to align our domestic law policy and regulation in a wide range of governance area with OECD policy and standard. And should Indonesia enter this agreement, there will be a roadmap for a rigorous domestic reform in various aspects of domestic legislation, policies, and practices, including trade and investment. It will still be up to Indonesia, though, on its policy decision whether or not to keep a certain restrictive measures in trade and investment. However, with the OECD accession process itself in place, whether restrictive measure in Indonesia may need to be kept, the OECD will assist Indonesia to ensure that such measure is designed in such a way that are considerably more acceptable to OECD policy guideline and consequently become more acceptable to OECD members country than it is now. So theoretically, I would say OECD accession can give Indonesia a better positioning and its economic diplomacy on primary commodities than it is now.
Thank you, Bu Sinta. And Ambassador Okamura, in your previous speech, you mentioned how OECD plays its important role in the development and orchestration of global policies. Japan itself has been a member of OECD since 1964, and this year will mark the 60th anniversary of Japan's accession to OECD. So how has the OECD membership contributed to Japan's domestic development and foreign policy? Because we want to learn from Japan how Japan utilized its membership in OECD. Please, Ambassador Okamura.
Yes, thank you very much. It's a quite interesting discussion, I understand. And how useful the OECD is. Of course, as I explained to you, the OECD provides a quite good platform of policy coordination and the learning process of among the member countries in different policy making, etc. So for the governments, OECD is useful to do any part of the domestic policies. But this is not only that you see that any areas the governments and have to develop its policies towards the better. But you see, sometimes reforms, sometimes the deregulation, for example, really a very tough the question. That everybody knows that how the government, how the policy should be changed into a better one. But it is not quite easy. And especially sometimes we need a really good understanding from the public opinion, the press, and political sectors to see. But OECD provides us a quite good evidence and quite good guidelines. So in Japan, the domestic ministries, they ask the OECD good advice. Which kind of direct direction, which direction the Japan should go to tackle those emerging issues, and then OECD make quite good advice to the governments, and the government officials, and they really set up a policy. And then we provide this information to the all stakeholders of the government, political decision. So it is quite makes things quite very smooth way. And also, for example, the economic policies. OECD is providing economic outlooks, and it sometimes criticizes the domestic policies or how the management of economy, and then we have to listen to those good advices. Another very important sector is that I'm happy that Shindat talk about the business community's strong expectation to the OECD. And it is true that business communication, business sector has a lot to think about the new, how they say, order, not only just a market economy, but also emerging issues. And OECD is, of course, this is a strong body for the standard setting and rule making. But there also the OECD is a strong place to tackle the emerging issues such as sustainability, ESG, and corporate governance, and IT, AI. You see, and for example, the data management, data flow, those issues, there's no other international organization which is dealing with. So if we, being an OECD member, then we can join, we can do this standard setting, rule making in the quite emerging field. So OECD, being an OECD member, Japan really took profit of those policy making. So I stop here. Maybe I would like to have Asian country into the OECD body to form sort of Asian, to tackle those issues from the Asian point of view together.
Thank you, Ambassador. So as Ambassador Okamura emphasized policies coordination as the key ingredient of Japan's success story as the member of OECD. And Bu Sinta also mentioned before that Indonesia's membership in OECD and maybe other multilateral organizations is not a silver bullet to our economic development, especially in primary commodities. But the essential homework is how Indonesia can align its related policies to be the member of OECD. So Pak Ian, the decision to join OECD must be translated into policies, especially how it will be followed up by different agencies, different government agencies. And considering that by this October, we will have a new government administration in place. So my question is to you, is Indonesia ready to be a member of OECD? As joining OECD requires some sort of adjustment on our side, what would be the regulation and institutional changes that are expected, and how prepared is the government to be the member of OECD?
Well, I think it's not a matter of how prepared we are, but once a political decision has been made, then we must be committed to that, right? The international community will judge a country not by the words they throw, but by the actions they take on the commitment. So for me and for the government, it's important that whoever takes the the new helmet in October to continue the accession process in the OECD, right? Because I think if we want to achieve those goals in mind by becoming Indonesia Emas 2045, achieving 80% of our middle class community, I think we should strongly consider of joining the OECD. Again, I'm not saying that the OECD is the only method to achieve what we have in mind for 2045, or borrowing the terminology raised by Bushinta, the silver bullet. No, but with that, we learn what the developed countries want and how developed countries achieve a stage where they currently are, right? But we can also learn from their mistakes, their errors, policy mishaps, for instance, that cause them economic losses. So it's I think this forum is attended by more than 380 participants from over 26 countries. It's important for us to voice out that whoever becomes the president or the economic ministers to continue pursuing Indonesia's accession process. What I need to mention here is that the accession process doesn't happen overnight. It takes years, normally, 3 to 7 years to become a full-fledged OECD members. And I was in Paris last year to meet with the OECD officials. We talk about the standards that a member must adhere to. And it was discovered that, actually these standards, we can do it in parallel with Indonesia's accession process in a way that, the Secretariat will not force Indonesia to abide by certain standards in order to become a full membership, but we can do it in parallel. So this is something good for us. So that means we at the national level would have time to identify and to do the mapping of policy sectors that needs to be reformed firsthand. As I mentioned, we are quite strong in the digital economy and small medium enterprises policies. But we have a target, for instance, in digital economy in 2045 to become, to have around 20% contribution to the GDP, right? And we have a target to have 61 unicorns. Now we only have around 11 or 12. Digital economy will create new jobs and extensive business opportunities, and will also accelerate transformation of other economic sectors. So I think it wouldn't be surprising to see another type of omnibus law in order to streamline the policies, the national policies, to make them in line with OECD standards. But we do it one step at a time. Now we are still waiting at this moment. Today, actually, we are still waiting for the decision of the council members, council meeting members in Paris, that is held over the past 2 days, yesterday and today, to discuss Indonesia's accession process. Hopefully, that can be unlocked by the council meeting soon, so that we can, take off and start doing the necessary homework in due course. Mbak Lucia.
Thank you, Pak Ian. Pak Ian mentioned before about how long the process Indonesia will have to be the full member of OECD. And besides the financial and economic issue, we also know that OECD are also ranging from anti-corruption, artificial intelligence, climate action, COVID-19 recovery, digital tax, future of work, and youth. Seems like we will have a various homeworks if we really become the member of OECD. So my next question will be for Ibu Sinta. In your opinion, should the membership be accepted? Which key issues should Indonesia prioritize as a strategic issue of its policy in OECD ahead, particularly that can support our domestic economic development? Please, Ibu, you may have 5 minutes to answer the question.
Yeah, I think we businesses really believe that what we need to be prioritized are fundamental issues for improving the investment climate. This is related to anti-corruption, transparency, governance, which universally required by business domestically and international partners from OECD countries that will invest in Indonesia. So if we see this, businesses will not overlook other issues as well that are, of course, equally important, such as technology adoption for industrialization, skill transformation, green transition, etc., which in parallel should be improved unconditionally by Indonesia. The interplay, I think, between anti-corruption and governance is pivotal to improve the credibility or trustworthiness. I think predictability and certainty of Indonesia investment climate, effective governance rely also on policies, on accountability, ethical conduct, and corruption undermine really these principles. So we also did Apindo did the survey for businesses on our Apindo Economic Roadmap 2024 to 2029, and only 13.7% businesses perceive the governance has been implemented with the principle of participation, accountability, and transparency. Governance has become one of the 5 fundamental aspects of our own economic roadmap, aiming at more creating legal certainty and improving institutional and coordination structure. Businesses also assess the need of prioritizing the second issue, which is the climate action. And I think the Paris Agreement becomes signal to all actors for the serious action, strong commitment, and collective works to achieve the GHG emission reduction. So as you know, the current climate action are still far from sufficient to keep global warming below 1.5 degrees Celsius and to avoid the worst impact that could occur. I think consequently, it is crucial for nations to intensify also the efforts in order to realign with appropriate trajectory. I think Indonesia, under the enhanced NDC target for emission reduction through domestic effort has increased from 29 to 31.89%, and with international assistance from 41 to 43.2. So climate action has become one of the 5 also fundamental aspects of our own business Apindo economic roadmap. And I think recommendation of adoption of SDG, ESG by business and the development of green industry is very important. Now, the third issue that I would like to also prioritize is, of course, the future of work. That this also needs to be prioritized due to the fundamental transition towards technology. I think this is related to the current low level of human resource conditions. We have low skilled worker, and given this situation, there is a need for acceleration in the transition. So understanding the changes that Industry 4.0 and Society 5.0 will bring to the Indonesia business is very, very crucial. So we talk about digital transformation and so forth. This includes also the digital technologies and automation that companies will adopt. Also the jobs that will grow in the future, the skill needed for the job, and how to develop these skills. So business see that there is definitely a shift in terms of the type of job that are needed in the future. And we would also like to demand and prioritize different set skill from the employers. And based on, as you know, the WEF future of jobs, 6.6 million jobs in ASEAN 6 are projected to be redundant due to technology by 2028. So 41% of these 6.6 million workers lack of essential skill required for future jobs. Additionally, 50% of global companies estimate that automatization will reduce the number of full-time employees by 2022. And so future of work has become very important aspect. And as you know, for Indonesia itself, we have a bonus demography, but this only will last 10 years. So in other words, if we are not putting our act together to create more jobs for Indonesia, this bonus demography can become a liability. As we know, right now, with the absorption of job has also reduced significantly in Indonesia. We have shifted the last 7 years from the labor intensive to the capital intensive. So investment. So this kind of things, I think, become very, very crucial for Indonesia.
Thank you, Ibu. So we have discussed about how OECD membership will benefit Indonesia and how Indonesia shall utilize the OECD membership for the sake of our national economic development. As the last question for our moderated discussion, I want to dig more about what is the meaning of Indonesia's membership in OECD will give to OECD itself and to the world. So Ambassador Okamura, my question is, with Indonesia being the third ASEAN country to join OECD, what would this mean for Asia or even for ASEAN? What does it mean for OECD in general, which is often being associated as the Western and rich country club? Please, Ambassador, you may have 5 minutes.
Thank you, Lucia. It's quite an important question. But before answering to the question, I would like to some reaction to the Hadian's remark. You see that we have to recognize this accession of Indonesia to the OECD has not just a political decision of Indonesia, and now that it is sort of how to implement that political decision, but it has a long story. And imagine that Japan has been working together with Indonesia since long. And I'm talking about this OECD program of CREP, Southeast Asia Regional Program, that Indonesia and Japan jointly created in 2007. Well, this is really a long story. And also, I would like to just say this is really the moment Indonesia has chosen a very good moment on this issue, because you see that this year, this year, the Japan is the chairmanship of chair country of MCM. So, and today, Prime Minister just announced that he is going to Paris to chair the ministerial meeting in May. So that it is quite an important year for Japan, and together with all ASEAN, Southeast Asian countries, to achieve this accession issue of the OECD. In fact, we have Japan and Indonesia are two joint chair countries for this CELAC, and now followed by Korea and Thailand, and now the Vietnam and Australia is really working very hard to push this the membership of Southeast Asian countries to the OECD. So it is a really big trend which coming from our joint effort. Going to that question, that what is going to the important impact of the membership of Asian countries. In fact, we have to take note that now the Asia is more and more important in the international world economy. That the Asian countries, not only the Southeast Asian countries, but China and India, we are going to be quite a big motor to the development of international trade and economy. So Asia is more and more responsible to the management of the world economy. And I think that we really need to be keen, not just a follower, but also a leader of the international world. And in that sense, traditional leader of the world economic order, I mean that Europeans and Americans, they are a bit, asking themselves that the basic rules are really workable or not. And especially in the question of digitalization, question of sustainability, question of social responsibility and corporate responsibility, they are asking each other. For example, the climate change issue, we are really ask each other how this capitalism, the market economy is going well. And in that sense, I think there is some new approach of way of thinking, new input from Asian countries can be possible. I'm really sure that we share somewhat different aspect to approaching those social economic issues. And I really expect, looking forward to working together with other Asian countries to provide a new, way of thinking to approach to those world issues. So this is my answer, what the Asia can contribute to the OECD activities.
Thank you, Ambassador Okamura, and thanks for all the speakers for the fruitful discussion. Let us now begin the Q&A session, but let me remind the participants, please keep your questions brief and clear so discuss. We kindly request you to direct your question to one speaker only. If you want to participate in this Q&A session, you can use the chat box and the Q&A boxes in the YouTube. You may also get the chance to directly ask speakers by using the raise hand button in the Zoom. I will take you in the manner and order you appear on my screen. So I already have the question. The first question is from Ivan Korompis from UCL. The question is, would OECD's membership improve Indonesia's difficult trade relationship with US and the EU, especially in critical minerals for renewable energy, and to also increase investment prospect on critical minerals and commodities from fellow OECD members to reduce over-reliance on China? Maybe Pak Ian can answer the question, and if Ibu Sinta wants to jump in after Pak Ian.
Thank you from Pak Ivan, Ivan Korompis. The answer is I'm quite optimistic that it can provide some ways to improve the relationship, the trade relationship between Indonesia and the EU as well as the US. But I think the key factor here, talking about trade relationship, is respecting each other. Both parties should respect each other's. You know, with for instance, with the European Union, we have, as Ibu Shinta mentioned, we have a dispute at the WTO on nickels, and then as well as on palm oil. And on palm oil specifically, the EU, through the European Union deforestation regulations, is implementing some sort of rating mechanism towards countries perceived to have a high rate of deforestation. So I don't think this is a proper way to respect, our partners, rating each other, telling each other that one is below one standards. That was, let alone the standards was multilateral, but sometimes the standard is implemented or enacted unilaterally. So the key factor or the key point is how both parties, Indonesia and its trading partners, can have mutual respect towards each other's national regulations. And of course, we need to be able to see from a different lens, from a different perspective, that Indonesia is also aspiring to become a developed country. Right? And I think hilirisasi, downstreaming is one of the routes that Indonesia must take at this stage to become a developed country. So coming back to your question, I do believe that becoming an OECD membership would, to a certain way, improve our relationship, our trade relationship with our Western partners. But again, above all, I think that sense of mutual respect should be in place. Over to you, Lucia.
Okay, let me add a little bit. I think definitely we all know that OECD has numerous standard and guidance on economic and business practices, good and services that are globally and universally acceptable. So the more Indonesia adhere to such standards, I think even beyond the SSN requirement, the higher the investment rating, export competitiveness, product standard, greater market access of Indonesia's goods and services can really tap into. I think we also know that OECD is, we call it a club of rich countries, which are major source of global FDI and big buyers or importers of global goods and services. So the more competitive Indonesia may seem in the eyes of big buyers and global investors in OECD, the easier it will be for Indonesia to attract quality investment and to tap into the global value chain. And secondly, in terms of effectiveness in global cooperation and economic advocacy, I think OECD countries have a more solid and unified stand on various global economic issues. So we talk about service liberalization, we talk about data-free flow. This really enhance their diplomacy strength in international forums such as the WTO, making the sense more dominant and robust in terms of achieving the strategic global agenda. So even if Indonesia has a dissenting opinion compared to majority of OECD country, I think we are in the position, if we are already a member, to still benefit, that we can still influence the OECD stance to be more accommodative or in favor of Indonesia economic interests. Having said that, I think I want to come back again to my previous comment about the commodities, that yes, I agree there is mutual respect, obviously needs to be, but I think at the end of the day, there are some alignment of the domestic policies that definitely Indonesia has to be ready to do. I have to say, even with Ascension, it will help Indonesia in completing its negotiation with other bilateral partners. For example, we are now in negotiation on the EU CEPA, Indonesia-EU Comprehensive Economic Partnership Agreement. Definitely, this will help in basically completing the nego, because a lot of the issues here will definitely, if we are considering our interest in wanting to send to OECD, some of this issue in such agreement will have to be completed by Indonesia.
Thank you, Bu Sinta. Now our founder, Pak Dino Patijal, will raise a question, maybe to Ambassador
Yes,
Komura. Pak
thank
Dino,
you.
please.
I have two questions. Thank you. I have two questions. First, in Japan's experience, what has been the most difficult adjustment to joining the OECD? And to the Indonesian participants, either Sinta or Ian, what do you think would be the most difficult adjustments to joining the OECD? And are there issues that would be politically sensitive? Yeah, maybe even issues that doesn't have anything to do with economics. Yeah, but I would love to hear your viewpoints on that. And then the second question is, we've heard what Indonesians think of OECD and of BRICS. Yeah, there's plenty of views on that. But what is the view of OECD towards BRICS? Yeah, can you enlighten us on this? Thank you.
Ambassador Komura, you may
Yeah.
answer the question.
Okay, so the accession of Japan to the OECD is 63 years ago. So I don't have any you see the background information about the difficulty that Japan had at the moment. But we had also still the quite I don't say difficulty, but quite important. You see that. The conflict inside the OECD, which is that the EU countries are majority of the OECD countries, and EU's policy making process is quite strong, and they are quite dominant. And 22 out of 38 countries are European. You see that, so, and they have just make everything in Brussels and present their decision making to Paris. We need alliance of non-European countries to deal with such issues. For example, climate change issue, the decarbonization issue. Those are really tough questions that we just want to provide a different point of view. But European countries are so strong that they have already done this and that in Brussels. So in Paris, Japan has quite a difficulty to join with this EU-led policy-making process. So for the time being, Japan is, of course, one of the big, strong leaders in the OECD, but it's not always that very happy harmony which prevails inside the OECD members. If I'm answering to your question rightly, I hand over to Lucia.
Ambassador Komura, can you also answer Pak Dino's question about how OECD thinks about BRICS, because Indonesia also considers to be the member of BRICS than OECD?
Well, you see that we are now really talking about this issue, but Brazil is now strong candidate for the to the OECD members as well as in Indonesia, and the many of the BRICS agenda is not quite going well. But we really need that the OECD should be we want to have a quite good outcome of global policy making. If BRICS just come to join with the OECD, that is quite a good thing. And two of the BRICS countries coming into to the OECD, this is a good news. I think that there's a quite a good way to solve the global issues such as climate change, such as digitalization, how to handle the data flow, etc., etc. Where I believe that we can work together.
Thank you, Ambassador Kamura. Ibu Sinta, maybe you want to jump in about the Indonesian biggest objection to Indonesia.
Sorry, I want to touch also perhaps before answering Dino's question, also touching on the BRICS, because we did kind of a comparison as well from the business perspective. How do you see the two? I think essentially, of course, business will support Indonesia to join international organization membership as long as it has a clear objective or target to be achieved and can display strong contribution to Indonesia domestic economic interests. I think, but for resource efficiency sake, I think such membership has to be done in order of priorities. I think based on the merit they may give to Indonesia economic agenda. So we know that memberships are costly, and I think Indonesia need to weigh also the benefit of potential of existing international cooperation each organization may have for the national interests. I wanted to touch BRICS because I think if somehow we need to look at the pro and con, I would say that from the business perspective, Indonesia urgently need is not really the de-dollarization, which may be the biggest draw for Indonesia to be a BRICS member. I think what business believe is Indonesia needs very urgently to be globally recognized competitive economy to trade, to invest, and to do business with. In this regard, Indonesia needs a comprehensive and speedy structural reform to our economy to meet global standard of competitiveness. And this is where we believe that the OECD can probably is better in this area. And this come back to Padino's question in terms of what's really one of the most difficult policy. Obviously, I come back on my original answer on the priorities. But you know that when we talk about anti-corruption, we talk about governance, transparency. Indonesia, this is one of our big challenges when we want to improve our investment climate. We talk about legal certainty and so. So even in this topic of anti-corruption, I think this is something that we really have a long way of really addressing how we need to provide policy that can be more effective on this. I also want to touch about the trade policies. In some respect, I think Indonesia's decision, for example, when we talk about, we mentioned before about banning export commodities on nickel, for example, and things like that. I think in some way, how we can, obviously Indonesia need to make somehow alignment to the international policies. And I continue going back to this with our trade policy of wanting to expand obviously our downstream industry and so forth. A lot of the trade policy that coming out now in Indonesia may seem to also be a bit more protectionism. And I think this is something that we really need to pay attention while we are addressing our session to OECD.
Okay. Pak Ian, do you want to jump in about what is the most difficult adjustment for Indonesia if we want to join the
Sure.
OECD?
Sure. Thanks. Thank you very much, Badino, for your question. I think I would like to refer to what Ibu Shinta mentioned about an anti-corruption and environment as one of the most challenging policy adjustments that Indonesia need to make. But also in addition to that, there's gender. We are currently working on a self-assessment on how we can close the gap by aligning to OECD standards and approaches. Indonesia has one of the highest literacy rates for women among Asian countries. I think with around more than 90% of women age 15 to 24 considered literate. And we have implemented laws to tackle inequality gap between men and women. And taking the example of political parties are mandatory to be composed by at least 30% of women. And women needs to hold about 20% of parliament seats after the election. So gender issues, in addition to anti-corruption and climate and environment, can be considered as one of the most challenging policy adjustment to the OECD standards. And to your second question, but issues that they're not even not related to economy, are politically sensitive. But we need to be mindful that out of 38 OECD members, not every members we have a diplomatic relationship with. And I think the rules of the game at the OECD is that if you want to become an OECD member, you have to have unanimous decision out of the 38 countries. So, but I personally don't think, and this is what echoing what my minister Airlangga Hartarto mentioned in various opportunities, that bilateral issues are not criteria for and should not impede opening accession discussion for Indonesia. OECD is basically a policy a discussion forum to set better standards for countries joining, and I don't see this should be a tit for tat with our bilateral issues with countries that we don't have a diplomatic relationship with. So, long story short, I think we should be able to put into the right context of discussion between membership and other issues. Over to you, Malusia.
Thank
you,
you for
Badino.
all our panelists. So we have another two questions, but it might be go to Pak Ian. The first question from Rio, Brawijaya University, asking about you mentioned before about Indonesia might need another omnibus law if we want to be the member of OECD. So the question is, sorry, Pak, are the people of Indonesia ready for another omnibus law to adjust the OECD regulation? Because we know the first omnibus law, many people contrary to it, and how the response of domestic citizen about if we might need another omnibus law. And the second one, the second question, Pak Ian, many concerns that economic liberalization posed by OECD will harm the interests of the MSMEs, the UMKM and the local industry. What are the safeguard policies that Indonesia anticipate aside from harmonizing the regulation to implement? Maybe Bu Sinta want to jump in also for the second question. Pak Ian.
Right, thank you. Let me start with the second question first about the micro, small, medium enterprises. Look, one of the challenges of the Indonesian MSMEs, apart from getting financial support, is of course facing barriers to internationalization and accessing new markets globally. So strengthening this part of the economy could support workers and businesses throughout Indonesia for them to make better living, better revenue, higher income and wages. Supporting SMEs to embrace the OECD standards and best practices on, for instance, labor disciplines, ESG and RBC or responsible business conduct, I think could help lifting Indonesia's contribution to global value chain and open up new market access for our micro, small, medium enterprises. More robust supply chains and higher value added productions by Indonesia's MSMEs in sectors that we are leading in, for instance, agriculture, fisheries, and many others could benefit the people, communities, businesses, and investors throughout Indonesia. So overall, I think we see the merits of adhering to OECD standards to improve or to naik kelas for the micro, small, and medium enterprises. And secondly, about the omnibus law, I'm going to need some help from Ibu Shinta on this, but we are just envisioning that in order to become an OECD member, a similar practice to omnibus law might be needed, right? But this time around, I think what we need to handle carefully or handle rightly is how we engage multiple actors in the process, right? Apart from the substance itself, I think the process can also be substantial. So we are not rushing. OECD membership needs patience. We need to carefully identify the sectors and the policy issues that needs to be reformed and that can help that are considered as key issues by the OECD members that can help expedite the Indonesia's recognitions to become an OECD membership. So I think the process we need to do better than the one that we had in the past on the omnibus law, as well as the substance. Lucia.
Thank you.
Yes.
Bu Sinta, do you want to jump in?
Yes. I will add on to what Pa In has responded. I think first of all, we know that small medium enterprises 97% of our economy. So we're talking about large amount, right? And I think the question has always been the readiness. Are we ready to do this? When we talk about Indonesia, we have to look at who's the stakeholder. And from the business side, definitely small medium enterprises has to be put into consideration. So I have to say that the way of the cost benefit analysis needs to be done properly, and this should include business sector. I have to say many are not still clear of this, right? We need to do more socialization, and this is part of our work as well, in Apindo as well as Kadin, and how we can socialize more and bringing all the necessary actors. When we talk about, and this is related actually to the omnibus, because the whole purpose of the omnibus, the biggest structural reform that Indonesia has ever made, is definitely we talk about creating more jobs, improvement of investment climate. This all will benefit the Indonesian business, the Indonesian people, I have to say. Now, the point is when we talk about the details, right? Like for example, we have done the reform. This is done. The policies has been created, but we know that implementation has still a lot of challenges. So there's definitely a gap. So this is all interrelated on the readiness, both from the government side in creating the policy, as well and actually being able to execute it, and from our side. So I think this is I have to say, after hearing all the cost ambassador and everybody's talking, definitely we've seen a clear benefit. But I think this has to be translated in a much clearer picture on a more cost-benefit analysis of what ascension to OECD means. And this especially for business, which we are ready to do, because we definitely want to know, how is this going to impact all the different levels, the big businesses, including the small, medium enterprises.
Wonderful. Thank you for all of the speakers, Ambassador Okamura, Pak Ian, Ibu Sinta, and also for the audience to joining this FPCI GRIPS virtual public discussion forum. So since we already almost 3:30, I would like to close this discussion. Thanks for FPCI for the invitation to moderate this session, and also thank again for our speakers. Please give another round of applause to our speakers. And now I would like to return the screen to our MC.
Thank you so much, Ms. Lucia, for moderating today's discussion. And thank you also to all of the speakers for sharing your incredible insights. Before we wrap up the event, I would like to invite the speakers and everyone for a short photo session. So I hope everyone can turn on their cameras, and yeah, we will be waiting for you to turn on your cameras. Okay, so on my count, 1, 2, 3. Once more, 1, 2, 3. Okay, thank you everyone. It has been a fruitful discussion, and I'm sure that audience found the session is interesting and highly informative. Today's event is available for rewatch on the FVCI official YouTube channel at Secretariat FVCI. And thank you everybody for tuning in to today's discussion. You can follow also our social media handles for more information about our activities, events, and programs. Also, stay tuned to our next FVCI GRIPS virtual public forum via Instagram or Twitter at FVCI Indo. See you at the next FVCI event and enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Bu Shinta.
Thank you, Bu Sinta, Ambassador Tamura, Pak Ian.
Thank you very
Thank
much.
you, Mr. Mura. Thank you, Pak Dino. Thank you, everyone.